Okay, here's the second part of the video lecture for Introduction to Demography. My Valley High School students who are in class Monday, this will be our true pickup point. This is should be a new slide. If you see an icon of a phone, a cell phone at the top corner, my original intention was to show these in class and then have you use your phones to take pictures of these images, because these are ones that I want you to have either on your iPods, your computers, whatever. Well, now they are immortalized here on the web, so you can stop these. I would suggest maybe snapping images of these with your phone, that way, or you can remember where they're at, but I would have them on your phone maybe, that way you can refer to them quickly. But figure 21, I hope you can see this. If not, maybe you can enlarge it on your computer screen. How fast the world population is growing. This gives you some perspective. If you can't see these for some reason, email me, guys, let me know, and I'll get these to you some way. But we have births and we have deaths that happen every day. Now, what we're finding is that in the world, overall, there are way many more births than there are deaths. You have 365,000 births every single day, 148,000 deaths every single day. So at the end of every single day in the world, we're adding 217,000 people to our population. Now, this is as of 2002. These numbers are a little dated, but the trends remain. If you want even more perspective, every second we add 2.5 people to the world's population. Every minute, in the time that I started this video up to about right now, we've added about 151 people to the world's population. In an hour, from the time you sit in my class in your high school to the time you leave and get seated in your next class, we've added almost 10,000 people to the world's population. 217,000 every day, 1.5 million every week, 6.6 million every month, and every year we add 79 million people to the world's population. Here's another way to look at it, how quickly population has exploded. From the time of Christ, the birth of Christ, we had only 300 million people in the world. And throughout much of modern, what we would call modern history, you can kind of see, there wasn't much population growth. I mean, you had birth rates and death rates that would kind of fluctuate, but at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the year, the millennium, you would have pretty much not much population growth. Not until around 1800, and we've already kind of talked about this a little bit, did we start to see population start to grow and then explode. And we talked about the doubling trend already with population. We'll talk more about it here in just a few minutes. We start to see from 1930 to 1960, the world's population doubles. You can kind of see even into projected 2000, up to 2100. It's projected we'll have 11 billion people in the world. So you can kind of see through a lot of history the population didn't do much, and then explosion. So the idea is that what's going to happen. The globe isn't getting any bigger. We're not increasing physical space on the planet, but we are definitely increasing the pure numbers of people in the world. So is this going to be a problem? And a lot of people say yeah. Some people say, well, really, no. We'll talk about all that and what all that really means. Now, something I want you to be familiar with, and you see the phone icon again up here, so get this one if you can with your phones, or remember where this is. You're going to want to refer to this. We talk about the demographic transition in demography. You have 4 different stages for this. You have stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can kind of see, it shows you the birth rate in blue and the death rate in red. Stage 1 of this transition, you can look at any place in the world right now, and we can kind of figure out what stage of the demographic transition they're in. We could also look at one country throughout time, historically, and see how it has evolved from stage 1 to 2 to 3 or to 4. Stage 1, you have births and deaths are pretty more balanced out. High birth rates, and you have high death rates, as you can see, and the numbers kind of stay the same because they're about equal. Stage 2 of this theory or this model, you have what's termed rapid growth or population explosion. So what's happening, and the reason for that, is that the death rate is going down. Fewer people are dying or they are living longer, and the birth rates are still very high. So what that does overall is it increases the number. It increases the number of people in your population. And you still see a lot of developing countries, like on the Asian continent in India, are still in stage 2. Now, stage 3, birth rates start to drop. and deaths also continue to drop, so things sort of balance out again. So while it's kind of like up here where you have high birth rates and death rates in stage 1, that's all good and well, but it's a wash, so your population's not really changing much in numbers. Now we're kind of down here, it's the same situation. At the end of stage 3, birth rates and death rates are dropping, they're low, but it's a wash again because the rates are about even. So it doesn't really, your population growth is kind of leveling off. And then you get into stage 4. More advanced countries like the United States, for example, parts of Europe, Ireland, Germany, for example, Scandinavia, those areas are seeing population leveling off, even shrinking and decreasing. You're starting to see deaths now outnumbering births. People are living longer, technology, medical care, all of these things, proper diet, education about how to live longer. People are living longer, coupled with lower fertility rates. People are not having as many babies. They're waiting longer to give birth for culture and social reasons. So we start to see actually some places are starting to lose numbers. So we'll spend some time looking at where countries fall sort of on this model. But it's important to understand those stages and kind of what they mean. Now, a few more important demographic terms that we're going to talk about and visit in this unit and as they apply directly to sociology. First, we have population size, we have population growth or decline, population processes, distribution, structure, and then population characteristics last but not least. And we'll take these one at a time, so you don't really have to jot down or know this particular slide, because like I said, we're going to tackle them one at a time. And there will be images that I'll ask you to capture with your phone. We'll start with the first one. If you can see, your population size was the first one. And we'll start there. So we're looking at simply how many people there are in a given place. How many people are there in West Virginia versus Ohio versus California? How many people are in North America as opposed to the Asian continent? So we can look at population size and make comparisons and then use our sociological imaginations to try to figure out and decide why that is the case. Why are there fewer people in West Virginia per square mile than in New York, the state of New York? If you want to look at population size, I'm going to adjust my camera to make sure I have everything here. There we go. Again, I hope you can see these. You should be able to. If not, make them bigger on your computer. If that doesn't work, you can take an image of it with your phone. Let me know if there's a problem. But you can kind of see here, world population in terms of the developing or the underdeveloped, if you will, the poor countries in green. And then you have the developed countries or the richer nations in red. And you can see, in terms of population, in 1965, overall population was a little over 3 billion people. You can see billions of people and see how that works. Projected to 2050, we're looking at a little bit over 9 billion people. Projections into the year 2100, which will be off the chart over here, would have it up closer to like 11 billion. We talked about that. So you can kind of see population size. It's always bigger. You can see it's always kind of there are more people in the developing countries. That's what the green kind of represents. And then the red gives you an idea of how many people there are in the developed countries. So this is one way of looking at population size. We can do it in terms of developing versus developed countries. Don't know if you can see this. I hope that you can. I'm really kind of focusing on this table 1-1, not the text above it necessarily. 10 countries with the largest absolute population size. China. This is 1.3. We're looking at billion here. Okay, so 1.3 billion people in China. That's 352 people every square mile. If you can think about what a square mile is, drive a mile in your car from start to finish and kind of make a square around that, a mile all the way around. That gives you an idea what a square mile is. You would have that. 352 people every square mile. That may not sound like a lot. When you get into India, where they have over 1 billion people in India, they have 856 people every square mile. In the United States, we're kind of lucky. We're more spread out. Even in cities where we think it's crowded, we have a lot of space. We have a lot of space. Only 79 people per square mile. Now let's go to Bangladesh, where they have 141 million people. It's not a lot, but Bangladesh is a smaller physical space than China or India. And then when you're looking at the density per per square mile, or people per square mile, 2,542 people living in every square mile. And you think about that. To give you a little perspective, think of your high school. This may not be a good comparison, but I'm going to try it anyway. If you had to live and work and play and take a shower and sleep and live in your school, in some space, a corner that you could call your room or your house, with every other student that attends Valley High School, that might give you an idea of what it's like to live in Bangladesh and have that many people concentrated within a small area. Would that be good? Would you be comfortable living and working and playing in a small area with everybody on top of you like that? Most of you would probably say no. That would not be okay. So population density is a problem in some parts of the world. Now, population growth or decline. We're looking at how the number of people in a given place is changing over time. We've already talked about natural increase versus decrease. You've got your phone icon you can use, hopefully, if you need to do that. Looking at figure 1.3, you can see, and I've already talked about these numbers, it's another way of looking at it. Births, when you weigh in with deaths, it gives you, again, every year we're adding 73 million people. Every month, 6 million. Every day we're adding 200,000 people, etc., etc. It's another way of looking at that. We could look at West Virginia as our example. West Virginia's population has decreased by approximately 200,000 people since 1950. And you might think, well, that's not really a lot. Doesn't sound like a big number. But West Virginia we are one of the lowest or smallest populated states in the country. So that is a lot. And when you look even more closely at the numbers, you're seeing that it's not middle-aged people or older people, senior citizens, that are leaving our state. It's young people, people your age, college age. What happens is people get a college degree who live in our state. A lot of those people move because the economy is not good here. Job opportunities are not as plentiful. The quality of life is considered to be greater or higher almost everywhere else in the country. So they leave, they move. And that leaves behind fewer people and a larger portion of our population that is older. And you can even see by region, another example, in the West is experiencing the most population growth. Businesses have been relocating from the Northeast to the West, places like Arizona, places like California, Nevada, because it's nicer, the weather's better, tax breaks are bigger for companies, jobs have relocated to the West. It's considered to be a better place with a higher quality of life than the snowy, cold, densely populated cities of the East and the Northeast. And that's why you see population decrease in the Northeast, and you can kind of see that too. So we start to see the numbers, but we also start to understand why. Population processes. We look at mortality, which are death rates, fertility, which are birth rates, and migration, people moving into and out of certain areas. So we try to start to understand. I feel like my camera's slipping again here, so let me see if I can adjust this just a little bit before you take a picture of it. There we go. I think you can see this very well, but it's looking at migration rates, net migration rates. You see the negatives, the white or the lighter colored areas, the negative migration rates. This represents people moving out of areas. You go to the African continent, you go to the Middle East a little bit, and you see the greatest rates of migration out of those places. Then you go to places like the United States. We were in the darker colored area. We see the most influx. We have greater numbers of people moving into our country as opposed to leaving our country. Places like Australia. So then we start to ask the questions, why? Why does everybody seemingly want to come here? Why is it that people are wanting to leave Africa and leave the Middle East and not go there? Then you start to understand politics. There's warfare. There's religious persecution, terrorism, all of these other things. In America, the idea of the American dream, a better way of life, people have always wanted to come here and continue to do so. Look at population distribution. Where are people located and why? We could look at it in terms of rural versus urban development, if you will. Adjust my camera one more time. Get a picture of that would be good. Try to get this to where you can see it on the screen. Go. If you look at it worldwide in 1950, you can kind of see that 30% of the population was rural, and 70% was urban or city. When you go to 2010, it was roughly equal. You start to see the idea of urban development all over the world. Just as many people live in cities as they do in countries. Then when you get to projected into 2050, you're going to see almost the opposite. By 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in defined urban areas, and only 30% will be living in rural areas. So why is that? Is that a problem? Well, it reflects a major shift in agricultural economies to industrial economies. And we'll talk about what that means as we go through the class. Population structure. How many males and females there are of each age in a given area. For the most part, everywhere you look, you're going to have just as many men as women. But in some parts of the world, specifically in China, you see a huge gap. In some parts of China, this chart doesn't even really reflect that. You have a 70%, 30% split with 70% males, 30% females. That's incredibly problematic and a big deal. In societies that are patriarchal like China, where it's more advantageous to have boys, and in densely populated places in China, you want to have that boy. What happens is China says, we have so many people, now we're going to say there's a law. We're going to pass a law, you're only allowed to have one child. And it's way better to have a boy, by the way, than it is to have a girl. So what happens is that when couples have girls, they kill them. They put them up for adoption, but they also engage in what's called infanticide, which is not supposed to happen. It's not legal, but it happens anyway, because they want to keep trying to have that boy. So then you have a real big problem there. We could look at age distribution, another one you might want to take a picture of here. In the least developed and the more developed countries, you can see a larger portion of the population in the underdeveloped countries are younger. You have more of an even distribution of population across all ages in developed countries, especially in the middle of life, like in the U.S., like in parts of Europe, in Britain, in Canada, for example. Whereas in India and Africa, etc., people don't live as long, and you have more people who are younger who are alive and active. So we start to understand that. And the last slide, population characteristics. What people are like in a given area in terms of education, income, occupation, family, household relationships, immigrant status, etc. So we start to look at what does America look like in terms of education, jobs, finances, political persuasion, etc. A lot of different ways we could look at population characteristics. We could look at education, and we could start to see another one to have a picture of here. Unfortunately, West Virginia leads the nation in a lot of bad stuff. Educational attainment is no different. We have the highest high school dropout rates. This chart doesn't reflect that, but it's true. The highest high school dropout rates in our state compared to any other state. We also have the lowest percentage of people in our state with bachelor's degrees or higher. You probably can't make it out very well, but it's like 16.7%, I think, of our population in West Virginia has a bachelor's degree or higher. If we're at the lower end, the lighter colored states represent the lowest levels of educational attainment. Even the states in the South are doing better than we are when it comes to that. Then you see states with the highest, like Virginia, Colorado, and Connecticut, Massachusetts, have a very high proportion of their population with bachelor's degrees. So why is that? And again, we try to use sociology to understand why that may be. And that is the end of this part. Thank you very much.